And so when we think about social media, and usually we would probably interview somebody that's maybe at one of the largest nonprofits, but what we decided to do this time for this session is interview somebody who I know and had a chance to meet several months ago, actually many months ago now, probably about 8 months ago or so, that is really sort of starting the wave when it comes to what's happening in transparency, digital government, and social media overall. Justin Herman. And if you don't know Justin, please make sure that you get a chance to see some of his work. You can find even him and some of his talk at MCon this year, where we first met. But Justin is in charge of and oversees the social media managers at the federal agencies of our wonderful federal government. He works with GSA, and in that role, he provides several different things. One being support to those social media managers and helping them think through how do we create obviously a more engaged citizenry through the types of agencies that are going on. Well, without further ado, Justin, how are you?
Not bad. How's it going today, Derek? Thank you very much for having me today.
Yeah, well, thanks for being there. I kind of mentioned a little bit brief bio, but how does one get to where you are, that you oversee all of these individuals and so forth? Because, I mean, how many social media managers and agencies do you oversee right now?
Well, to clarify a little bit of what I do, Derek, is so I work for GSA's Division of Digital Government within the Office of Innovative Technologies. And so essentially what we do is that we're an office that services and supports all other government agencies. And so specifically what I do is, so I lead what's called the Social Gov program. In the Social Gov program, we do everything from negotiate terms of service and legal agreements with Google, Facebook, and Twitter on behalf of public services in the U.S. government. But most excitingly, at least for me, is so I get to lead a community of over 800 federal managers, and it actually grows every month. But right now, because a couple of years we were just 200, now we're over 800 federal managers, and this is everything from the CIA to the Post Office, EPA, State Department, DOD, HHS. Pretty much, if you think across the gambit of all public services, they're represented in this group. And what we do every day is what we try to do is build shared solutions to issues, because while every mission in government is unique and different, as you can imagine, from the Park Service to NASA, is that we're able to find certain ways and certain hurdles that we have that by creating a shared solution, rather than each government agency having to replicate it and spend taxpayer money on it, we can collectively work to face the challenges that we come up against. So that's the day-to-day usually of what we do here. And so could you repeat your question, though? I apologize.
Yeah. So how did you get here?
Sorry, Derek, I get so excited talking about working with other agencies. What did I do?
That's right. Well, tell me a little bit about what's your background? How did you get to where you are?
All right. Well, it's interesting because, Derek, when you and I first met at MCon, and focusing on actions that millennials are taking to reshape the world, a lot of them what we talk about is the concept of a digital native. Well, I was not a digital native per se, but in a way I kind of grew up with the technology. Where, of course, when I was younger, I played in mountain streams and piles of leaves. But when I got older, it got the time when you get your first personal computer that then you can start hacking away on. I remember when I went to college, I was the first online editor of the student newspaper. There was all sorts of ways in which there was firsts like that. In high school, I designed my high school's first website, which was actually pretty fun because nobody was much on the internet, so I got to hide Easter eggs in there. Like on the band page, I got to put the quote by George Bernard Shaw, "Hell is full of musical amateurs." Little things like that, because like I said, you're growing up with the technology. And so when I got out of college, and I always believed and was attracted to public service, and I became an Air Force officer, the United States Air Force, doing public affairs. And my focus is I believe that traditional communications and public affairs and community involvement would be increasingly met by advances in technology, which would allow us to do the job better, more effectively, and open. And I remember there was times like I got kicked out of a command meeting once by our colonel because I said the word blog. And that was such a weird concept to say the word blog. I remember he goes, blog? Did that lieutenant just say blog? And I had to leave the room. And I remember thinking, imagine me like a dozen years younger being like, there's a world out there for me, for people who believe in these technologies like blogs.
Who believe in blogs,
so
for sure.
Yeah, it was good. And so I worked on electronic publications and stuff and really tried to pursue that idea. When I left the Air Force, I spent a little bit of time working on the Hill, Capitol Hill, when I came to D.C., and then I moved into, for a while, working for a medical association, because the big thing then was health information technology, which is still a fantastic and interesting field for people who really want to not just be on the cutting edge of emerging technologies, but to see really that meaningful practical application.
Right.
From there, I started advising government agencies as a private consultant on their digital engagement, on their social media, and on what's called open government policies. Open government, you'll probably hear it a lot today, is when we build a transparent, responsive, engaging, inclusive government. It's basically when you hear that, you're like, well, that's the kind of government that I want. I want one that's transparent and is responsive and engaging. But just so many years ago, this was all a bit quite new. And so I did that for a bit, and then my next job, I found myself here.
Good.
So it's kind of, for me, it's the natural progression.
So, Justin, I suspect, and you have to tell me if I'm wrong or not here, that being a social media manager for a federal agency is a tough job. I suspect that not everybody is incredibly happy in social media in the kinds of followings and posts. So, am I wrong?
Well, that actually gets to, I think, what interests people the most when we talk about this. And this question itself gets to the core of it, because with the difference between a private sector brand and a public agency, for instance. A private sector brand might be using social media tools, but in different ways, because likability, popularity and stuff, that is obviously core and very important to many brands. Now, for public services, we have the responsibility of not just trying to be popular, but being effective. Sometimes it's not even just being all in your face all the time, but when a citizen needs the services that they pay for with their taxpayer dollars, that we are available, we are accessible to them, and as effective as we can possibly be. And that actually ties to a larger issue that we could talk about today of what those differences are between the private sector and the public sector. And for us specifically, it forced us, in order to design better performance systems, ways in which we're measuring, different metrics that we're looking at, and how we can apply it to the mission. And then right down to, and this is something that's important to anybody, what's a conversion to us, and how do we achieve conversions and get action out of our engagement services? For us, we had to, like I said, we had to have an awakening in that part, because early on, just years ago, when government first started using social media, they listened to everybody else, as was common, of being like either, well, there's no return on investment, well, you can't really measure this, or it's your likability and your reach that's most important. And we really had to then stop and kick the tires and be like, what are those most important things to taxpayers that their public services be doing that's different than the private sector? Does that make much sense?
Yeah, well, let's stay on the conversion topic for a minute. Yeah. Why do you think it's so difficult for organizations, whether you're a nonprofit cause, public sector, or even private, to get conversion to occur? Is it the thinking around it, or what? I mean, why is it difficult for so many to get that to happen?
Well, it's interesting. Do you want to know the number one growth area for social media in government right now? And this is provided to me by companies who sell dashboard platforms, management, things like that. It's not in communications and it's not in marketing. It's in customer service. And that becomes when we early on started talking about this, to be like, how are we using these tools, and what is the best way that government can start adopting engagement in a way, because we say if you're in the social gov community, you are working to do one of two things, either measurably improve a citizen's service or measurably reduce the cost of it. We've cut the fluff out of it and been very performance focused in our approach. So when we look at it now, it's one thing, it's nice to share and talk and have dialogue. But when you're able to, let's say, for instance, it costs taxpayers a certain amount of money, let's say X number of dollars, to answer a phone call and answer a question by phone. And I don't know about you, but in the past, there's been agencies where I've spent a long time waiting on the phone to get an answer. And potentially, you can't even get through sometimes. This is the past, though, because then email comes around, and it costs, let's say, significantly less to answer a call than it does through email. But now through social media, I'll give you an example. The Department of Education's Federal Student Aid Program, which is focusing on providing information and services for citizens, young people specifically, and veterans, being able to get student loans to be able to get an education. They're now able to answer 150 questions an hour in 2 languages. And that's with like a few people on board. That's the speed and the mechanisms that they've been able to place into their social media operation, where they're not just using social media to tell the story of their organization, they are using social media to redefine the story of their organization and provide levels of services that are unachievable before. And that's a model now that we've been trying to spread and has been getting accepted quite well. And that's so when I say that the biggest growth area right now in government for social media is not just your comm shops and your public affairs shops. It's being institutionalized. Things like customer service throughout the organization. That's what makes this an incredibly exciting time, because when people say, you read articles of social media is dead, I don't care what the term is, live or die. This technology and the things that we're doing, we've never had so many exciting things ahead of us.
So let's talk about some of the trends or things that you've noticed across the system, or just social media in general. What 1 or 2 things have you noticed change, even in 2014, than in, say, 2013, when it comes to social media?
The big thing for us that we've seen that, once again, it's something that's always been talked about, but there's a difference between the talking, the launching and test phase, and then you see fuller adoption of it. And that's the integration of services and the breaking down of social media, not just as a mechanism to talk or to engage, but a data source that we can learn from and refine from and use to improve the very mechanisms of organizations ourselves. It's like one of the things when I walk around and I talk to colleagues, we have fantastic, in GSA, we have what's called the Digital Analytics Program, where we have a dashboard that shows the real-time performance of over 3,000 government websites. It's breathtaking to even just check this out and the things that you can learn from it. We have the digital search program that has instantaneous search results from all of those websites that you can learn what are people looking for. In that same vein, we're able to take in and look at social data, break it down. What kind of questions are people asking? What's going on? And the myriad of ways in which, once you break it down to that data level, that people are able to employ it for their organization's performance metrics, to be able to steer and refine strategies. It's just absolutely exciting, or at least I get nerded out by it, so I get excited by it. Other people it might make their eye twitch.
It would seem that
Does
we're
that make,
in,
much sense?
it does. And it seems that today, if you look at social media over the last 4 or 5 years, I think, 5 or 6 years ago, it was just get on there and start communicating, right? And then we moved into, let's move these people who just kind of communicate every once in a while with us to get them to act in some way. And now it's even further. It seems like today, when I talk to you and some other social media strategists, that say, well, now is the time to figure out what people are really talking about and want out of their social media involvement with whoever that they're following. So we've become more sophisticated, would you say?
Definitely. And I think it's not, there's an expectation here now. One of the things that we look at, and when people ask us, what do you see happening in the future? You see less and less having destination applications that you go to, and your social experience will be ingrained into the services, into your pages, where it almost, frankly, becomes something you'll take for granted. And it's like right now, it's like when we talk about responsive design between, websites versus mobile devices, I mean, quite soon, Derek, we're going to be looking at the dashboards of electronic vehicles. Watches will become, more prevalent. The cast that is on my broken foot right now, there's a maker community, people that are working to make it into a wearable device. For fun, but I mean, that opens up the door where when we talk about engagement and we talk about, responsiveness and be able to use data in these ways, it's not just going to be I'm logging into an app in order to chat back and forth with somebody, but this engaging experience and responsive experience will quickly see themselves in objects in your home, in apps that you might not even know you're using it at that time.
Yeah. In this community that you work with, what is the number one complaint from social media managers? What is the big thing that they continue to struggle with?
I think one of the bigger challenges we've always had, we had it 5 years ago, we had it last year, we're going to have it next year. And a come back to it is performance analysis and performance metrics, because this field is constantly evolving. And we come back to what we were saying before about conversions, Derek. And that's something that's important for every organization, is that in all the myriads of tools and options available, is an organization has to be sharp about keeping their eye on what is it that is their goal from this. You could spend all day sending out tweets, getting retweets, and think you have a successful program, but if it's not delivering the conversions that are important to you. Now, for us, it might be people more easily being able to fill out a form and be part of a government program, or to ask questions during a hurricane or an earthquake. For a company, it could be buying a product, or, or becoming more aware and signing up for a newsletter. Every organization, that conversion is going to be different, but it only gets more challenging to chase the tail of what that conversion is and have a coherent, evolving strategy that follows through with that. For that reason, one of the things that we've sort of changed in recent years is before somebody would put out a policy on social media. And most organizations have this, like a social media policy. In government, we certainly have to have it. But what would happen is they would say, and is current until, and there's a date 4 years from now. Well, my goodness, Derek, in 4 years from now, social media probably isn't going to look the same.
Right.
1 year from now, all the metrics we have and our mechanism, my dashboard in Google Analytics and Hootsuite, I have to tweak all the time. So what we stopped is doing iterative version 1, version 2, version 3 as much that come on an annual cycle, and have built what's called living documents. So if you go to digitalgov.gov, where we have a number of my performance metrics guidance, our accessibility for persons with disabilities documents, they're actually editable right there within the website. Because the idea is that rather than putting out separate versions, we need policy and guidance that lives and breathes with advancements in technology itself. If it's updated twice in a day, fine. If it only needs to be updated once a year, fantastic. But it has to reflect the modern, because that's the biggest challenge that we face, is that we are, in all measures of the term, in an emerging field. And us as managers, as the people responsible for this, it is our responsibility to be on the cusp of that.
Yeah. Let's talk about messaging. Is there anything in terms of messaging that you've seen, at least recently, be more successful than other types of messages? Anything that you've noticed across the system?
Well, and this is one of the things that are interesting, especially with government, that we deal with, is that we say in social media, you want an authentic presence. Right. You want an empathetic presence. You want for people to see you as a human. But what happens, though, in government is that sometimes if you have like a 24-year-old social media manager who's like, I'm going to do a great job, but then all of a sudden people just see the shield. They just see the seal, and they don't view social media managers in government as people in that sense. You know what I mean? It's hard to break down that idea.
I think you could have that. I think you could have that same thing with any nonprofit who uses their logo and out there as their brand as well, wouldn't you say?
Yes. So it is incredibly difficult because even what one day would work, with or agency to agency, because there's balancing that in social media that still authentic conversations and authenticity and personalization are the most effective. But that being said, where's that balance? And that line of balance may change rapidly, which is why, I'll tell you, I'm firmly against posting ahead of time. And I don't schedule any posts, but the reason for that is that I never want to be caught in a situation where you schedule and then all of a sudden something happens in the news and then it reflects, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sounds like you're either being thrown down, but also, even though I know that's a lot more work on me, what it does is it forces me to be in the now and reacting to the conversations that I see right there. So if nothing else, like I said, other organizations, they find great success with it, but for me, I want to be able to make sure that what I'm doing is I'm responding to what's in the now. And so, like I said, but there's multiple ways to go about it, because the other side of that, Derek, is that let's say there is an earthquake or there is a hurricane. Federal government must put out information that in no hyperbolic way of saying it will save lives, or if done improperly could, you know what I mean, could jeopardize. So at that point, you don't want the humor, you don't want the personalization of government. What you want is the most accessible, most understandable, and and redistributable information you could possibly have. Because I'll tell you, Derek, one of the challenges that we run into is, like on Twitter, for instance, celebrities, are, and, A through D are verified, but emergency management agencies often aren't.
Interesting.
And so we go through that extra hurdle because during hurricanes, like I said, situations that could mean the life and death for people, we're not just trying to get our information out. We're competing against hoaxes. We're competing against fake accounts. And it's something that, like I said, my colleagues take extremely, extremely seriously. What's been very nice, actually, on that point, I have to say, is that Facebook took the lead in using our repository that we have of all social media accounts in government and decided to verify all federal accounts despite their popularity. Because it's the idea that we'll have that expectation and that need where even if it's not, quote unquote, a celebrity agency, that taxpayers, people rely on that. Also, it is something we're working out with Google as well. So even in that sense, of that, those challenges of dealing with fake accounts and poor verification and things like that, private sector companies have been, for the most part, very responsive in that, and that's a fantastic thing happening this year.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the social media manager. What makes a successful social media manager? Because I'm sure you've seen good and bad, right?
Yes. And the thing is because, well, I'll tell you, when we talk about a successful social media manager, now I could think of immediately, for instance, Twitter, TravelGov. That's State Department's Bureau of Consular Affairs. In 24 hours, they answer questions from any traveler in the world. I remember I was taking my one vacation in my life, and I was in Budapest, and I woke up one morning to a tweet asking how I was doing. And I thought, oh, that's a pretty high level of customer service right there, which if you're a traveler and you lose your passport or something like that, that could be, really save the day. I mean, something that I found interesting is that most people don't know that there are digital park rangers now. And somebody was really excited by that. They're like, I've never even heard of a digital park ranger. But that's how much you even have traditional organizations like the National Park Service, where you'd wonder, they don't even, you didn't think they'd need this stuff because they already have the most beautiful land and it sells itself. But they're already thinking of how can we use data and how can we use these tools to further enrich people's experience of the national park system. And so it's like there's digital park rangers. Then, of course, you have your fantastic people, community managers at NASA. The list goes on. So even that idea, because I don't have the exact numbers on this. I'm trying to get somebody to ring them up for me. But it's a safe bet that the largest, the most diverse employer of social media and digital engagement professionals, at least in in our area of the country, in Washington, D.C. area, is the federal government. And that usually is pretty surprising to people because many people just think of like a couple different accounts, fantastic accounts, when they think of the government and social media, and not the fact that we have thousands of accounts. And not only that, but when we use the term social media, once again, it's not just talking about marketing. We're building in ways a collaborative infrastructure itself of public services. And you see that through the social gov community. So the diversity is there. If you want to follow up, you want to talk about what doesn't work, is a lack of flexibility.
Explain.
I've had the same job title, the same wording in my title for 3 years. And my job looks nothing like it looks like 3 years ago in that sense. Or, and the thought is that we are working in a field and we're coming at this in a way that most people don't believe bureaucrats and federal employees must. And that is to be incredibly performance-based, test-based, experimental-based, and to be able to go in because we have to change. And we have to embrace change, but we have to do so in a way to a high standard because ultimately we have to be able to answer all of this back to the citizens paying for this. So in a way, it's such an exciting time and an exciting role to be in right now, but we do feel that weight of that extra responsibility to taxpayers that also, like I said, I think just makes it one of the greatest, most exciting jobs you can have in public service right now.
Okay. All right, so Justin, last question before we depart, and that is, what advice would you give a social media manager at a nonprofit that might be listening to this today? What any pieces of advice that you've had and you've learned from over the years working with all of these social media managers, what would you tell them?
To a nonprofit right now, I would tell them that first off, that you have hundreds of partners who would love to talk to you in other public services like the federal government. In fact, programs that we have right now are specifically looking to share information and learn from people outside of the federal sphere. And so that's the first thing, is that no matter what organization you are in, you are not alone, and there are hundreds of us waiting to talk to you. Two, and because I did work in a nonprofit for quite a while doing this, is once again, you're going to a lot of people are going to have opinions because they set up a Twitter account and now they're a social media expert or something to that effect. But what ultimately is going to drive the success is not what anybody else says, because nobody else can define what success is uniquely for your organization except for you and your customers. For us, our customers, of course, at GSA or other government agencies in that sense. For nonprofits, it's your members. And so, like at GSA, we work a lot on, we call it the customer experience. Our citizens are our customers, different agencies are our customers. And so when I'm building a program, I meet, I talk, I have focal groups, I encourage feedback, and when I get feedback, I respond to every piece of feedback. So when I'm building a program, I'm not just doing it and releasing it and not knowing how it's going to work. It's not just for those people in my organization. They can see themselves in it. They're part of it. They're stakeholders in it. So if you're at a nonprofit and you're trying to think of something, you really want to do something bold, the first thing isn't just thinking, wow, I'm going to go in and wow them. Bring them on board with it. Ask the members, ask the leadership, make them stakeholders in this. And for that little bit more of effort, the product is going to come out that much better. And then it's not just something you brought to them, it's something you brought them with. And that's something, that's a benefit that no one can replace.
Justin, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. This has been an exciting time.
Good. Well, Justin, thank you again, and thanks for any of you who have not seen his video of his speech at MCon. Make sure that you go to themillennialimpact.com and you can see his video there. Justin Herman with the GSA. Thank you so much again, Justin. Take care, and we wish you the best.
Oh, thank you, and say hi to everybody over there at Chief for me.
Will do. Take care.